What up? What up? What up? It's your man, Sean P, coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience, man. I'm your host, Sean P, self-published author, public speaker, podcast host of the Sean P Experience and the Griots podcast. I have a very, very special guest. I'm excited for this show, man. I have my sister, Katie Mitchell, in the building. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Sean.
Man, I'm excited. I've been talking about pros to the people. I am driving my friends crazy, giving them voice notes and highlights. It's such a wonderful book, and I'm so excited to have the chance to sit here and talk to you about it in depth.
Thank you so much. I'm excited too.
Yes, ma'am. Let me do your official introduction, right? So we have Katie Mitchell is more than a bookseller. She is a story keeper, a literary architect, gathering black brilliance and binding with care. Rooted in Atlanta, Georgia, ATL Shawty, she lives, works, and writes in the rhythm of the South. Where her words bloom like magnolias and her shelves carry liberation. Through her online and pop-up bookstore, Good Books, it doesn't just sell books, she builds sanctuaries. So much so, the world took notice. New York Times, NBC, NPR, PBS, they have all put up a chair to witness her work. A proud Dr. Porter Wesley Fellow, Katie walks in the tradition of Black women who archive, amplify, and activate. She's the kind of voice you don't just hear, but you remember. Katie Bitch.
Okay, I like that intro. I'm gonna have to
I
bring you to
try.
all my.
Hey, I'm willing. I just need food. I just need food.
I got you.
So I love a good origin story, right? Tell me about back in your early childhood or whatever it may be. Like, how did you fall in love with books?
hmm it's definitely my mother's influence. So my mom made sure that me and my brother were surrounded by Black books. I'm in her library right now, surrounded by Black books, and that's really how she raised us. So she would have, when you're a kid, you want to go outside and play, and my mom was all for that too. But she said, before you go outside and play, you're gonna recite this Langston Hughes poem, and you're gonna do it right, and then you can go outside and play. So that was kind of the foundation for me loving Black literature, loving Black people. I never had that phase where I thought Black wasn't good or beautiful or anything because my mother really instilled that in me at a young age.
So you are sitting in your mother's library?
Yes, this is my mother's library.
I thought you was at the bookstore. That's your mother's man. That's wonderful. That's beautiful right there. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
she's that literary person, and so she's definitely such a big influence on me and my writing.
Yes, ma'am. So this show is called Sitting with the Griots, the tradition of the storytellers. How do you feel about being the griotee for the ladies and carrying the tradition of archiving and sharing our stories? You writing and your literal archiving with this. How do you feel
Mhm.
about that title?
I feel like there's such a weight to it and it's so important. Um, and to be someone who is that someone entrusts with their stories, I take it super, super seriously. So when I was writing the book, I was just making sure that these stories really got their due and their shine. I was wanting to make sure that I wasn't just repeating what other people were saying. I was like, let's really tell this story. There hasn't been a book like this before. I found it super ironic that the story of Black bookstores hadn't been told in book form because they hold our histories, they hold our stories, and no one has told their history and stories yet in this form. So I took it very seriously. So I love having that title. I cherish it, and I hope other people can see that love when they read Prose to the People.
Now, in your bio, I mentioned you being a Dorothy Porter Wesley Fellow. I
Mhm.
love Dorothy Porter Wesley. Her name isn't talked about nearly as much as it needs to be. I
Mhm.
learned about her from Dr. Greg Carr in class with
Okay.
Carr, right, years
Yeah.
ago. So
Yes.
for those that don't know, will you tell the family who Dr. Porter Wesley is?
Yeah, so Dr. Porter, she was at Howard University, a librarian in their library, and she really facilitated the creation of their Negro collection, is what it was called during that time. But not only being a Howard University librarian at that time, people from all over the world would be reaching out to her asking how to set up their Negro libraries and their universities or organizations. And then researchers from all over the world would reach out to her and say, I'm studying, Black women, or I want to know more about Black musicians. And she would sit down, take her time, write out book lists for them and send them back. She did a lot of collecting, so a lot of the books that are at the library at Howard in that collection passed through her hands. So she's just a really important person in the Black bibliophile world. So it's such an honor to be have a fellowship named after her.
Yeah, on this show, I'm always trying to highlight librarians, the archivists, the people that assist the scholars, and some of your favorite Black books that you know about. She gave them, like you saying, the blueprint on. You're writing about this topic. You need to go and read this. You need to go and get that. So it's instrumental the role that they play in these books.
And another thing that I recently found out about her is that, when you go into the library, you have the Dewey Decimal System. But the Dewey Decimal System used to just have Black people in one or two numbers. So whether it was a poem or whether it was talking about slavery, it was right beside each other. So what she did, she edited the Dewey Decimal System, didn't ask permission, just edited it to make it more accessible for people, because when you're in these libraries looking for certain things, you're looking in the poetry section, but all our stuff is in the Black section or focused on slavery, and people couldn't find the research that they were looking for. So that was something that she did. And of course, the Dewey Decimal System, people didn't love that at the time, but after her death, it actually caught on and it was expanded to include some of her edits.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. That's that Black woman magic right there, right?
Right.
So you mentioned what books meant to you early in life with your mother and everything. Tell us what books mean to you now at this point in your life and in your current journey. What do books mean to you now?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think my love for books just grows. I'm so lucky to be able to like sit around and read books all day. And so, like we were talking before about fiction and nonfiction and kind of relating that to our lives. We were talking about The Vanishing Half, Britt Bennett, just seeing all these people, all these Black people being able to just weave these stories and give new information. And then now being a part of that group where I'm able to give folks information that they might not have known. It's like, it feels really good. And it feels just like carrying on in that tradition of people who meant so much to me growing up.
Yes, yes, for sure. So, with our current administration and the government slashing educational funding, they're banning books left and right. People are losing jobs all over the place. What is the importance of the Black bookstores and book spaces in this climate?
Yeah, I mean, Black bookstores have always been at the vanguard of social movement and social change. They've also been at the center of a lot of surveillance and other presidential administrations that were not friendly to them. And so, in that case, I think their importance goes back all the way to the 1830s with David Ruggles, who had the first known Black bookstore. He's known as the father of Black stateside bookstores. And so he was an abolitionist. And not only did he have the bookstore in New York City where he was penning abolitionist and anti slavery works, he was printing them, he was distributing them, he was also freeing minds and bodies. He helped free Frederick Douglass and hundreds of other fugitive slaves. So I think with Black bookstores looking at where we started, we need to continue that tradition. We don't need to be a place where ICE can just come in and look around and see who's in here, who's reading books. Like, we don't need to be capitulating to book bans. It's like, no, you're banning this book is on our shelves and we're going to sell it no matter what. So being kind of standing strong in that tradition and not complying to this administration or to white supremacy in that way, I think is really important. And I've seen these Black bookstores really stand up, and I would love to see that continue.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So, in this book, you span the whole U.S. Had to
Yeah.
be a lot of miles you logged, flying, driving,
Mhm.
whatever it looked like. I love hearing about the research process behind the project. What was the
Yeah.
research process like compiling something like this? What was that like?
It was a lot of oral history. I wanted to get that oral history, write it down. And something that I find that I didn't realize while I was writing this project is how it would just be such a snapshot at this particular moment. There's a forward by Nikki Giovanni, and as we know, she passed last December. There's a profile of Ed Vaughn's bookstore, which was in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan. He passed in October. So being able to sit down with these people and get their thoughts on Black bookstores is really special to me. So I did the oral history for bookstores that are currently here or the family or owner was still alive. And then for bookstores like David Ruggles, who was around in the 1800s, where no one who was there is alive anymore. I was in the archives. So I went to the Schomburg in Harlem. I was able to go to the Newberry in Chicago. Atlanta has the Auburn Avenue Research Library. So I was able to be in those archives and digging through the boxes and seeing what people were saying about those Black bookstores as well.
So I know for a fact everything can't make it into the book. It's impossible. The book will be a giant, right? So tell me something that's not in the book that is like, man, I wish that was in the book. In hindsight,
In hindsight, so there's this story. I talked about Nikki Giovanni, and there's this story that a bookseller told me. Her name is Miss Nia. She's in Atlanta at Greenbrier, if you know. And so she has a bookstore called Madhu. And so I talked a little bit about the people that came through Madhu, but she told this story about how Nikki Giovanni was doing a book signing there, and it was a really big deal. Like everyone was really excited. But Nikki Giovanni, she revealed to Miss Nia that she had come into the store before, but she came in disguise just to see how they treated other people that weren't famous. And Miss Nia was like, "Oh, well, did I treat you well?" And she was like, "Girl, I wouldn't have come back if you didn't." And so her being a good bookseller and being cordial to everybody led to her being having that book signing that really was a turning point for her store. So I thought that was fun and a detail that I definitely would have put in there in hindsight.
you mentioned the late great Nikki Giovanni, man. What was it like for you to lock in the forward by Nikki Giovanni? Whenever you got approved or whatever, how did you initially feel like, man, this is going to happen? What was that like?
Yeah, I reached out. I told her how much she meant to me, her words, just different points in my life, how I leaned on her words. And when I was doing the research for the book, everyone had a similar Nick and Giovanni story and they were all positive. And so I was like, it's only right for her to have the first word in the first book about Black bookstores. So I told her that. And, she got back with me in a couple of days. And when she said yes, you should have seen me. I was just jumping around like, oh my gosh, because she meant so much to me. And then when it came through, because she said yes, but then I was like, let me calm down. Let me make sure it comes through. And so when it came through and I read it, I was like, wow, like this is so special. She was so gracious and was excited for the project and thanked me for inviting her, which was like, wow, my like heroes thanking me for being in my project. So that was really cool. So yeah, she was really, really dope.
You mentioned the oral tradition, and in Clinton Smith's book, How the Word is Passed, toward the end of the book, he spoke about like how many people, scholars, don't normally always respect the oral tradition. They want it to be in black and white. They want it to be, archived or whatever. So tell us about the importance of oral tradition, something that we always had as a people from the beginning, back to the griots, the oral tradition. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you don't respect the oral tradition, like how do you get the books? Like it has to be spoken first, you know what I'm saying? Um, so I think just sitting down, talking with regular people, and the thing with the oral tradition, people are going to remember things differently. Some people are going to like put in their little twist on it, and I think that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes it interesting. Like you can still present it to the reader and say like, "Hey, this is what they said," take it or leave it. And that still has importance to a book that I read recently was it's called Scattered and Fugitive Things, and it's talking about Black archives. And so you read that one? She's talking about
I know about it. I know about it.
yeah, getting people's letters and just their firsthand experiences. So I wanted to include people's firsthand experiences, like, okay, you shopped at this store and it meant a lot to you. Let me know about it. Like, no, a newspaper might not have interviewed you. Might not have been on 60 Minutes, but what you have to say and your experience it still matters. And I still want it to be a part of our collective story as Black people.
Yes. So I had the audio version of the book first. And
Okay.
this is one book where I'm glad. My normal habit, it sounds crazy. I have books in multiple formats, right?
Okay.
But for my interview shows, I normally have the physical and the audio to do my research. But when I finally saw the amazing images in this book, anybody out there watching this podcast, whenever, you got to get the physical book. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Aesthetics. I can go to almost any page in this book and just flip and just show. It doesn't matter where I land in the book. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Tell us about your attention to details when it comes to how the book actually like looks.
Hmm. So the thing is, I think that the history of Black bookstores is so visual. It's like when you go into a Black bookstore, you see the art, you see all the books, the covers, and it draws you in. And so I wanted the reading experience of prose to mirror my experience of being in a Black bookstore. Because I know not everyone has had that experience, but I wanted people to be like, oh, this is what it feels like. So the beauty of the book is, so intentional. It is, the beauty is part of the history. So that was important for me. I wanted it to be visual. I wanted you to feel like you visited the stores. I wanted to encourage people to visit the stores that are still open. And for the ones that aren't, feel like you've been there. I was asking people, what did it smell like? What were y'all talking about? Who was in there? All those things. So you feel like you really transported yourself to these spaces.
And I mean, job well done. I love to travel, but I know like having this particular book, anywhere I travel from now on, I'm gonna go in the book first. Like, wait, let me see what bookstores in that area. And in the back of the book, you have an actual a directory from A to Z, all the current, Black bookstores. I thought that was an amazing addition to the book.
Thank you. Yeah, I did it by state. So, whenever you're in a different state, just search it up, see where you can go.
You also have actual documents inside the book. We spoke about the government involvement earlier a little bit. You have documents, you have different memorandums and things of that nature. Tell us about any kind of document you saw that really moved you whenever you came across it. Something that shifted your emotions.
Yeah, so Joshua Clark Davis, he wrote an essay about Black bookstores in the FBI. And he shared a lot of his documents that he got from these files with me. And so he found a lot about Paul Coates, who had a bookstore in Baltimore in the 1970s. So Paul Coates, former Black Panther, he now has Black Classic Press, and he's Ta-Nehisi Coates' dad. And he has like the thickest FBI file of all the Black bookstores. And so one thing that I found really interesting was just how mundane a lot of the surveillance was. Like you would think like, he's a Black Panther, he's really doing all this stuff. And it was like, oh, they had a cookout and there are beans at the cookout. It's like y'all are spending government resources to watch us eat beans. Like, come on, y'all. But I think that really goes to how the propaganda works on people who, I'm all for the Black Panthers. I'm all for Black bookstores. I thought there was going to be like super salacious stuff all the way through this, but it's really mundane. And so thinking about how threatened the United States government was by Black people picking up a book and reading, by Black people encouraging others to read, by Black people sending books to folks who are incarcerated, it's like, these books are really powerful. And that's why they don't want us to read them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many of these stories, the Black book space is directly tied to the heart of like Black freedom movement, civil rights movement, Black power movement, 60s and the 70s. What do you think have shifted in today's bookstores, like versus those times? What's a dynamic that's different, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I talked to Paul about this, and he pointed out that a lot of the bookstores during that time were what he called movement bookstores. So they were activists who were starting bookstores, and they were basing their bookstores off their movement work. So Paul's a member of the Black Panther Party in Drummond Spear in Washington D.C. in the 1960s. A lot of the founders were members of SNCC. So they're using that framework and that worldview to start their bookstore. And then another difference is that these bookstores often had their own way of distributing the books, or they had their own printing press, they had their own like publishing site. So they didn't want to go through middlemen all the time to get the information out because they knew that, white people would censor certain things. So they wanted to go straight to the source, like, okay, we're going to print out this pamphlet, we're going to have these posters. So that's true for, Marcus Books in Oakland and San Francisco at the time. they had their own printing press. Paul at Black Book in Baltimore, Snick, a lot of the stores like that. So I think that is a difference that he pointed out. And now some bookstores have their own way of putting out information, and some bookstores have are started by activists, but it's less.
So do you think some of the bookstores of this time is more based on the aesthetics and the vibe and the feel, and not as much focus on organizing and things of that nature?
I think a lot of them are places where organizers and activists are very much welcome. So I go to a bookstore in Atlanta called For Keeps. And so they're always having, the Democratic Socialists of America there. There's different activists who come through and get their points across that way. But the owner herself wouldn't call herself an activist, more of an artist. But having that space where they can come, it's free, people can gather, people can read books to, get more information, I think is really important. So I'm seeing that as the current vibe of the Black bookstores.
I know for a lot of stories that you have in this book, you do a wonderful job giving like the origins of the store, the owners, their background, and what they did. I find it interesting, first of all, that a lot of these people, like they were not scholars. They did not go to college and all that. They were like self-taught people, and now the whole world converted down on their bookstores, man. Tell us about, some of these scholars and guys that thought of these things and what that means.
Yeah, one of my favorite is Louis Michel. He was in Harlem. He started selling books during the Depression. So he was just had a wagon walking up 125th Street in Harlem. And then so he came to found what is known kind of as like the best Black bookstore, the epitome of a Black bookstore in the United States, called National Memorial African Bookstore. And I love reading about him. Like you said, didn't go to college, self-taught, but just taught so many other people. His store was Malcolm X's home store. So when you see Malcolm X on the street doing those speeches, in the background you'll see the bookstore. And so Malcolm X learned so much from that store, and developed and sharpened a lot of his politics from the books that Louis Michel gave him. So I think it's really interesting how you can see Black bookstores like throughout history, and how they've influenced the course of history.
I love it. The first story out the gate about D. Ruggles out there in New York. I've never heard of this name in my life. One of the first black bookstores, probably ever. Talk about his history and like why isn't that talked about more?
Yeah, I want to know why it isn't talked about more. But yeah, he was an abolitionist, helped free Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass and his first wife actually got married at his house. So you can just see those through lines again. And the thing about David Ruggles, that I think a little bit more people are starting to talk about him. You'll see some news articles, or oh, did you know about this person? So like now he's celebrated as the father of Black bookstores in the United States. But at the time, what he was doing was very illegal. He was arrested several times. His store was set on fire because, like, when you think of contraband, you might think of alcohol or guns or drugs. But in the United States, the contraband has been books for Black people. And so for him to be passing out these books, helping free Frederick Douglass, an amazing orator, the powers that be, even though he was in New York, even though, it's not the South, and, it's not, chattel slavery like you would think, people were not happy with him. And so I think he really set the tone for Black bookstores in the United States being sites for liberation.
Yeah, man. And a lot of our heroes that we raised up, these bookstores and the owners are the ones, like you saying, they're feeding them books. They was teaching them on the side. They was giving them their worldview and their politics. The Schomburg, of course, is. I want to go there so bad. At least at some point
Yeah.
in my life, I want to.
Oh,
I've been to
yeah,
New
me
York, New
too.
York twice. I was just so busy I couldn't stop and go, but I want to go there so bad. Tell us about
Hmm.
the Schomburg and what does that mean to our scholars and our people.
Yeah, so the Schomburg is a research library in Harlem, named after Arturo Schomburg, or Arthur Schomburg. He went by both. Um, and so they have a bookstore too, an independent bookstore that I profiled in the book, but then they have like the research portion. And so a lot of the research for the book came from the Schomburg. I was in those boxes. The librarians there helped me out because, I'm coming from Atlanta, and New York's expensive. So I was like, hey, before I get here, like, let's get it together. And they got me together real good. So being able to get audio from people, like some of these people, it's like, I don't even know how they sound, but they had the audio, they had the newspaper clippings, they had their personal papers. I was looking at people's checkbooks. Like that's how detailed it was for the Schomburg. So yes, you absolutely have to go there. Literally any part of Black history that you're interested in, they have the information about it, and you can do that research, or just find a good book in there.
We have a question from the audience. I love my interactive crowd always. My brother asks, in terms of access and affordability of books, what are the disadvantages of a bookstore compared to a library?
Sure. I mean, of course, libraries, you get to go in there if you have your library card, check out a book, it's free, bring it back. And a bookstore, typically you have to pay for it. And they can add up. These hardbacks are no joke with these prices these days. So I do think that is a disadvantage. I love a library. You'll always catch me at a library. But one thing I love about a lot of these Black bookstores is they're kind of stepping in to that gap as well as far as lending. So I mentioned For Keeps in Atlanta, Georgia, they're an antiquarian bookstore, mostly like vintage books, and they have stuff from the Harlem Renaissance. They have just uh, stuff that you would have to, have an ID and, check a bag and all this stuff at like university libraries or a museum. They just have it out on the table. Anyone can look at it. Anyone can interact with it. And I think that's really important too. Um, and then there, like Louis Michel, like you, Mr. LA mentioned Malcolm X, the bookstore that he was out at all the time, that guy would do the same thing. He would let people just have the book, like, hey, I know you can't afford this, here you go. Or he had a reading library in the back where you can sit there all day and read the book. Like, don't worry about it. So I see Black bookstores doing that as well. But yeah, your point is taken very clearly. Like, libraries are important. They're more accessible and affordable most of the time.
And I want to also interject in this conversation about the Black bookstores, like beyond selling books, most times there are so many activities and events happening at the bookstore.
Hmm.
And then most times affordable things, or even free things. You go to African drum classes and dance classes and some kinds classes on various things the community need about voting and politics and like Martin Lamont Hill with Uncle Bob is having lectures and speeches. Like it's more than
Hmm.
just going to buy a book. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and you were talking about Baldwin and Co. before we got started. Lots of authors come through, and if you got the book from the library, really resonated with it, but just want to hear the author speak, I think that's great too. Just interacting with folks who wrote these books, and then also with people who enjoyed the book that you really enjoyed, and like building that sense of community that way too.
Yes. Speaking of Baldwin and Co., that was my next segue anyway. So me being here in Louisiana, for those that don't know, Baldwin and Co. is about 2 hours from me. I've gone to like 3 or 4 of their events, and it's always hundreds of people. It's a beautiful space. Every time I've talked to DJ personally, always humble and helpful and so gracious and everything like that. Tell the people that have never seen Baldwin, what your experience was like at Baldwin, and tell us about DJ.
Yeah, I mean, I love Baldwin and Co. Of course, named after James Baldwin. They have that really nice mural in there. They have a mural of Langston Hughes also, who I love. Yeah, and the coffee. People were lined up for that coffee. I was like, let me get some of what y'all getting, because what?
Hey,
Um,
let me just say, I don't want to cut you off. So for those that don't know, the drinks are named after books and whatnot. I had a color purple. It was
okay.
this lavender type drink, whatever it was. I will never forget. This is 2 years ago. I will never forget it. Amazing drink.
Yeah, so they the attention to detail that he has, I am really impressed with. He has a podcast studio in the back. Their courtyard is really nice where they do a lot of the events if the weather is good. So yeah, he's really doing it. And then of course there's Community Book Center also in New Orleans. Okay, yeah, you're showing yeah, that's in the back of the book. That's at Baldwin and Co. And yeah, there's just I love that every bookstore kind of has their own vibe, like their own flavor. Because I think a lot of times people just lump them all together. Like, yeah, that's a black bookstore, but they're so different when you go and visit them. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, or if you're traveling, just stop in and you'll see how different all of them are.
What do you think that Baldwin and Co. represents symbolically to today's generation of Black readers and creatives?
What does Baldwin and Co. represent symbolically? Um, I think one thing that stands out about them, but they're also in conversation with other bookstores, is the fact that they are uplifting a Black writer at all times by having that name. So there's Baldwin and Co. There's the Frederick Douglass Book Center, which isn't open anymore, but I talk about that in the New York chapter, or the Northeast chapter. There's the Salt Eaters, which was named after Tony K. Bambara's book, The Salt Eaters. Um, there's Ida's, there's Harriet's. So there's these bookstores that are really adding to the archive in a very particular way that I find interesting, focusing on a particular author, a particular activist, a particular work. So I think that is really important. And I think I just think about being a kid and going into Baldwin and Co. Baldwin and Co. in New Orleans, and like going to these events and just having a really good time. And like, what does that mean for a kid who might be interested in being an author and being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a bookstore named after me one day.
We were speaking a little bit offline, but I'll say it again for the audience. Like my experience of going there, being where I'm from, is not many book spaces, and you sometimes feel alienated as a reader here. But being in a building of hundreds of people, and we're all crazy about books, same way. If you're a child in that environment, like to see the excitement of books, and people are just so, it's a frenzy in there. They're trying to get their books signed. People are buying things, and it's a wonderful environment. I wish I was a kid being in that. I can't imagine what that would have did for me as a young reader.
Yeah, and I know he does a lot of stuff with kids in the New Orleans public school system, making sure that they get free books and have access to that space. So yeah, I think that's really important for the kids to see.
I want to go back around to Mr. Paul Coates. I love Paul Coates. I'm a huge Ta-Nehisi fan, first of all, but learning about his father and various things always blows my mind. Can you speak about the power of Paul Coates as a literary torchbearer? Tell us the importance of Paul Coates in the Black classic press.
Can you repeat it? It went out a little bit.
I was saying, tell us about Paul Coates, his role as a literary torchbearer, and the power of Black classic press. What he's doing with that, the importance of Black classic press.
Yes. Okay. So Black Classic Press is his literary press. It's been around for decades at this point. And they will do books that have gone out of print, and then they'll do also some new books. And I think what I love about the research process of this book is that it really opened my eyes to this like big like Black literary family tree that I see Paul Coates being very instrumental in. He talks about going to different bookstores like National Memorial African Bookstore in Harlem, and then he talks about the help that he got from other booksellers in the DMV area, and then of course he's Ta-Nehisi's dad. He was giving books to folks in prison, so he's doing a lot of things in this book space, making sure that one, he's being mentored, but then two, he's mentoring other people, including his son. But even me, he's been so helpful in this process for my book, which I wasn't expecting, but I'm so grateful for. And so seeing that elder like pass down the things that they've learned and be like, all right, go forward and keep it going, is really really important. And then of course Black Classic Press, it's important for us to have our own presses, to publish our own books, and Paul knows that, and he's keeping that tradition alive too, which is super important.
Yeah, and what you said about the helping aspect, I think that's the tradition of the Black bookstores. Like talking to DJ in private at Baldwin, like my dream is to have my own bookstore one day. And DJ, not even knowing me, was like, man, come up here one day when it's not an event. We'll sit down. Like, I'll give you the game. And
Mm-hmm.
then he told me that Martin Lamont Hill did the same thing with him. Martin Lamont Hill
Mm-hmm.
gave him the game. So it's just this passing of the torch. Everybody being so willing and not being the gatekeeper. Like, man, you want to get in the game? Like, the more the merrier. You know, I like that ethic.
Yeah, I think it's important too because it's not just about like it's not just a capitalist pursuit. A lot of people are in it because of the liberation aspect, of the freedom aspect, making sure that Black people have access to these books. So I do think I love seeing the cooperation from different booksellers.
And I was talking about Paul Coach once again with the Black Classic Press. Him taking these out of print books and bringing them back. So much of my shopping cart, my wish list, the books
Hmm.
cost thousands of dollars because they're out of print or they're rare.
Yeah.
So we need
Hmm.
more Black press putting these things back in circulation, getting these things at a affordable, accessible price tag. And as a writer myself, most of my projects are all Black, front to back. Every part of the book process, a Black person doing it, but the literal, the pressing up, making it process. We trying to
Mm.
find ways to circumnavigate that, but we need more Black press. I'm always talking about that.
Yeah, and speaking of the book prices being so high, that's been a problem in our community for so long because people what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, this Black book didn't get that many print runs. I'm gonna buy them up, hold them, and then let the price shoot up. And it's people who don't really care about our they don't care about what's in the book. They just want the money, or they want the trophy of, oh, I have this rare Black book, but not really caring about one, the people who wrote it, the people it's written for, or the information that's in it. So yeah, I've seen that too many times when I'm trying to find something.
I want to also ask you about I want to say it correctly, Caribou Books,
Karibu,
Caribou,
yeah.
Caribou, right.
Karibu.
Tell us about that bookstore, and there's so many prominent names that came out of
Hmm.
there. Jason Reynolds, amongst others, they were a part of that lineage, being in that space.
Yeah, so Karibu, they were a chain of bookstores in the DMV area. So they had stuff in DC, Maryland, and Virginia in like the 90s. And so they came up in a time where they again were part of that Black bookstore family tree where, Paul was around, Sankofa in DC was around. But at one point they were the biggest chain of Black bookstores in the United States. And they're still around. One wrote a memoir. One of the owners wrote a memoir. The other one is teaching at Bowie. So they're still around, still, active, kicking it. But yeah, they had tons of events, like you said, bringing people together around those authors. So when they closed down, people were real upset. There's an essay in the book that references like someone getting the news that the bookstore is closing down, and they hightailed it out of their class at Howard to, make sure that they were able to grab some books from them. But yeah, I think learning from them and writing their profile it's interesting to see like the afterlife of Black bookstores. And the store might physically close, but the people who are in there who learn from that, what happens then? What do they take on? Because the owners of Mahogany Books, both of them worked at Karibu at separate times, but both of them worked at that store. And so now you have Mahogany Books in Maryland, and you see what they're doing. So it's just a continuation of that legacy.
Yes, ma'am. Another question from the live audience. Doing your research, were there any historical changes to the book inventory? Like, were they catering just to Black people or to everybody?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. So I focused on bookstores that I define Black bookstores as ones that focus primarily on Black publications and Black text. But so you could still be carrying all Black text and trying to cater to other people too. So at one point, I talked to Malik Muhammad, who is in LA, and he was telling me about the Black bookstore revolution of the 90s. And kind of before that, a lot of the inventory were small presses, independent. I was in that class with Dr. Myers. Okay, hi Monique. Um, there were. It was like, okay, you can only find these books at Black bookstores. But what started happening, so I would say that was like the 90s and before. But what started happening is the big stores like Barnes and Noble, Borders when it was open, um, they would go to these stores, see that it was popping in there, and be like, write down their inventory and then go. So then the black bookstores kind of had to start competing. Terry McMillan, Elin Harris, they start getting big deals with major publishers. So then other black authors were getting those deals. So then you getting the major publishers in those bookstores. So it was like a slow shift, but it's definitely a shift. So I think now there's some bookstores you go to that have these small presses, um, and kind of focus on a particular politic. And there's other black bookstores that are like more general, still black authors, but it's like you could find these books at Barnes and Noble if you wanted to.
I noticed in the book, in many of the stories you share, after giving the beautiful legacy, like some of these bookstores are no longer in existence, like we just said. And it really, really hurt my heart, man. Like, what do you think some of the downfalls that you've seen in your whole trajectory doing this? What are some of the downfalls that we can avoid in the future, maybe, as bookstore owners?
I think one of the main things is owning the building. When you own the building, you don't have to deal with gentrification. I mean, you do have to deal with gentrification, but like these rent increases aren't a thing because you own your building. So Sankofa in DC, they've owned their building since they started in the 90s, and they've been able to make decisions that don't compromise their ethic because of that. They told me about a time when Nike wanted to have a party there, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like, tell us about it." And they wanted to have the Nike signs all over. They wanted to like brand their store as a Nike store basically, and they're just like, no thanks. And they can do that. They can turn down all that money that comes with doing that because they own their building and they're not worried about it. While someone else might be worried about how we gonna make rent this month and be like, all right, let's do it. So I think that's one of the biggest things is just like staving off the effects of gentrification in that way. And I saw Monique said that she was in that same class. Dr. Myers was in when he learned that Caribou was closing. hmm So
Yeah,
there's a lot of
we mentioned the government involvement earlier, and it's still persistent to this day. Like either the government directly or just people that follow a certain politic. We seeing black bookstores closing right now because they're being harassed. Other things are happening to their bookstores where they have to close ultimately. Like we got to factor in all those other variables too. Those extremely sometimes violent variables. From the history of these bookstores, they're getting burned down, they're getting blown up, or they're getting their taxes and their paperwork messed with, infiltrated.
Yeah, there's a bookstore that was in Buffalo that I think is really interesting called Afro Asian Bookshop that the owner was actually framed by the local police. Um, and during the riots in Buffalo, he had a safe space for the black people to come. They came together and like showed the police that they weren't scared of them. And because of that, they framed him, got someone in the community to say that he bought heroin from him, and he was sentenced to 31 to 41 years by an all white jury. And his crime wasn't about heroin, it was about the books. It was about giving people these radical ideas through these radical texts. And what's cool about his store is that after it closed, people that were, his comrades would make pop-up stores. They called it Afro Asian Bookshop in Exile. So that it would show up on university campuses, it would show up in prisons, it would show up in different cities and states. Basically just showing like, hey, you can't stop what we got going on. Like we're still gonna get these books out one way or another. Like you jailed him, you framed him. There's a good documentary about this too called Frame Up. And so yeah, it's been happening throughout the decades and we see it over and over and over again.
Do you think the digital space or platforms stepping in where physical spaces may be vanishing? Could that be a resource for us to go more digital instead of having the physical brick and mortar locations?
Yeah, I think people doing a lot of cool things like Sister Sci-Fi in Oakland. They have the bookstore vending machine. So they put the vending machine in coffee shops and other small businesses. So you still, get a little physical. You have that tangible book. You can get it right then, but she's not having to pay, exorbitant rent prices. So I think that's really cool. But of course, yeah, there's people who just throw some books on Instagram, like, hey, y'all see this? I think that's really cool. I've seen some really interesting books that I've never heard of just off Instagram because people post it. So I think that's one way to be, kind of scrappy. And until if your goal is to get a physical space, I do think that's beautiful because I do think it's nice to gather and be with people in person, especially now with AI. You don't know what's real and what's not. So I think that's really important. But yeah, I do think there are ways to fill in the gaps until you get to that point.
So, to anybody watching this podcast now or later on, what's some ways that we can keep these bookstores open? What are ways that we can help show more support, do more, and keep our spaces?
I think one important thing that I definitely try to do is just make Black bookstores a part of my routine. It's not like, oh, let me go support the Black bookstore this one day, or, it's Christmas or it's Small Business Saturday or Black Friday. Just like make it a part of my regular routine. And like you said, the Black bookstores are doing events. So it's not just charity. It's, I'm getting something by being in community with the people that go to this bookstore. They're getting something from me purchasing and being in community with them. So I think just making it part of your, normal routine. It's like, like going to the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, you go to the Black bookstore, also go to the library. Just being in community with these folks, I think is really important.
So, one of my favorite parts in the whole book is the very, very last section. The brother has the article in here about the bodies in the books. The bodies in the
Uh-huh.
book, right? Anybody watching this
Yeah.
show, you gotta you gotta read this. Like the
Mhm.
prose he has, he's doing alliteration, he's playing with the words. Like this is like hip hop ball. I got it all marked up. That like
Okay.
cause hearing the audio when I'm driving was like, wait a minute, he is flowing. But then when I read it with my
He
eyes,
rapping.
I'm like connecting it like, man, this dude, whatever he write, I want to read it. Tell us about the importance of what he's saying in this article about our pain has always became profit. Whenever we're dying and getting executed in the streets, the book sales jump, the t-shirts, all this bookmarks. So tell us about that dichotomy of what he's talking about.
Yeah, so that was written by Aaron Ross Coleman, and it was important for me to have it right there to just be like, a real kicker of the book. Like, all right, this is what we need to think about, um, because I was selling books after, during the time like George Floyd was murdered, and book sales were going crazy, and I just felt terrible about that. And I was like, what are other people feeling? What are other people doing? And I think it's really important, as Aaron Ross Coleman talks about in the article, in the essay, is to not, be so hungry for more Black deaths so we can sell a couple books, so we can make a couple dollars. Like, how do we make communities of readers that aren't based on Black pain and Black suffering? Because you can get addicted to it. You can be addicted to Black people dying just because you know that you'll, eat a little bit. But really, if that's the cost, then that means we're on the menu too. So I think that's so important, and I wanted to end the book off with that because it is a celebration of Black bookstores, but we do need to remain cognizant of not being captured, especially in that way where we're feeding off of Black deaths.
And again, I'm such a Ta-Nehisi Coast fan, and Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, and Dr. Imani Perry, Professor Eddie Glaude. But we know when certain things happen tragically in the world, they are called out to write these articles for the Washington Post and New York Times, Atlantic,
Hmm.
wherever. And hearing Ta-Nehisi talk about after Between the World and Me, him getting almost swept up in this thing where you're being called for all these platforms, and I mean, as a writer, it has to feel good to get called
Hmm.
on and get the article, get the op-ed or whatever. But hearing them struggle with that was interesting to read about.
Yeah, because you think about, you're a good writer regardless of what's going on, but they only want you when this happens. Like they're only platforming you and thinking about like, oh yeah, he'll be great for this, she'll be great for that, but it's in connection to our death. So
Our audience is so smart. Dr. Monique asked, how did you decide the order and the flow of the essays? How did you decide what goes where?
thank you for that question, Dr. Monique. So a lot of the essays, if they are related to a particular bookstore, I'll make sure they're close to that bookstore's profile. So Kiese Lehman wrote a essay about kindred stories in Houston. So I put them together so people can get that. Shar Adams wrote an essay about drum and spear, so I put it close to there. So that's one way I thought about it. Or like if I knew that the writer was just like a New York girl, I'm gonna put their essay in the Northeast section. So Rio Cortez, she used to be the manager at the Schomburg shop. So I put her essay after the Schomburg, or I put her poem after the Schomburg profile. Same with W.J. Lofton. He was always at For Keeps, so I put his poem after For Keeps. So I was intentional in that way, kind of fitting them to, what bookstore they're connected to, what region they're connected to. And then again, with Aaron Ross Coleman's, I thought his was just like so important, and I wanted it to close out the book and for him to get the last word in that regard.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Before we get out of here and wrap it up and land the plane, I want to ask you, this book is so amazing. What can we expect next coming from you? What's the next thing you're currently working on? Or you got an idea you're thinking about?
I have so many ideas. I can't lie and say I'm actually actively working on anything. I've been on book tour and doing all that, but I would love to do a prose to the people about Black bookstores all around the world. So if someone got some advance money for that, let's talk. Um, but yeah, I have
That
so
would be
many
dope.
ideas.
Globe trotting around the world? Oh my God.
Yeah, there's so many great Black bookstores, not in the United States. So prose was very United States centric, but there's Black bookstores all over the place. So I would love to do something like that.
And I wanted to land the plane on your wonderful mother. In the acknowledgement section of the book, you spoke so glowingly about your mother, her importance in your life, and to the project. Tell the audience about your mother's role in all of this.
Yes, my mom. So for people who are coming in late, I'm sitting in my mother's library. She just reared me in the tradition of Black literature, Black books, loving Black people. And one thing that I don't know if you know, Sean, the in the beginning of the book, the dedication is written in like handwriting. That's my mom's handwriting. So throughout the book, you'll see these pull quotes, and it's in this is my mom's actual handwriting that I put in the book because I always just loved her handwriting, thought it was so pretty, so I wanted her to have that piece in the book as well. But yeah, she's been so instrumental in my life and in the book, supporting me when I was at the library every day with no job. Like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm writing.
That's hot, man. That is hot. Well, thank you very, very much for taking the time out of your schedule, coming on, sitting with the Griots podcast. It's really, really warmed my heart. So excited about this. Thank you very much. Whenever that next project comes, I love to have returning guests. You're always welcome back on the podcast to come and talk about it.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really fun. Thanks for having me. And I'll definitely be back.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So for the audience watching this, whenever you're watching this is a very rare week for me. So I have 3 shows in 3 days. That's right. This is the show one of three. 3 shows, 3 days. It just happened that way. I would never do that on purpose, but look forward to tomorrow's podcast. I am talking about the Black Panther woman. Talking about Erica Huggins. Will be here tomorrow in the evening. The flyer is posted already. Black Panther woman, and I will see you all tomorrow on Sin with the Griot podcast.